weather. We got about 2 weeks of very unconducive weather.
Well, he's got AC and heat hooked up by him.
My chair is broken.
Yes. Well, I'm detailed with getting the RSVPs from all my people, which is it's hard. It's hard for many business folks to just say, "Oh yeah, I'll go take a long lunch," and to know that they will. I don't know. That's why we've always had the breakfast because of that. You know, we've always had the breakfast because of that. But we really wanted Billy Nungesser, and that was the only way we could make that work since the breakfast got it. So, but I think that as far as the general public and all of the elected officials, we'll get a good turnout from them for sure.
I don't be understanding that for nothing. It's like that every time. And it connected for the first time without a problem. Hammond City Council Public Hearing Agenda, January 25th, 2022, 5:30 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilman Andrews.
Present.
Councilman Diviterio. Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilman Wells.
Present.
Councilman Leon.
President.
Public hearing none. Hammond City Council Regular Session Agenda, January 25th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Councilman Andrews.
Present.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilman Diviterio.
Present.
Councilman Leon.
President.
Councilman Wells.
Present. This time we'll go into our prayer. Most gracious, loving, eternal, heavenly Father, we just thank you on tonight. Father God, we give you glory and honor and praise just for who you are. Thanking you, Father, for your darling Son, who you allowed to die in our place and for our sins. Father God, we know that we are not a perfect people, but we strive for perfection. And we thank you for that blood that was shed so many years ago on the cross just for us. We actually continue to guide us, continue to keep us right now, dear Heavenly Father. We thank you right now for all that you've done and what you're about to do in our lives right now, Father God. We actually continue to bless our city, continue to bless our administration, continue to bless the council, and continue to bless all of our families. But not only that, dear Heavenly Father, we actually continue to bless the city employees right now, Father. Our fire department, our police department, everyone that touches this city right now, Father God, we ask that you continue to let your light shine upon their path. That the good work that they're doing right now will be seen, and you will be glorified, and you will get all the praise. Father God, I thank you right now that everything will be done decent in order and pleasing in your sight. Therefore, you will get all glory, all honor, and all praise right now because it truly belongs to you. We just thank you for it all right now. In your darling Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of allegiance. I ask that all veterans and active military please render the proper salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, it normally be on that side. Yeah. All right, we're down to reports. Mayor?
Report on the street debris, trash debris, coming from Missy Coward with the parish. We've determined that an appropriate date to start the final pass to pick up right-of-way debris will be February 18th. This does not include the removal of stumps, which will take a little longer. Also, next week, the Wildlife and Fisheries will be bringing some rainbow trout into the Zumeri Park Pond. This is a unique thing to the south. Rainbow trout need at least 60, can't go below 67 degrees to survive. So this is pretty neat for a lot of anglemen, fishermen out there that like to fish, to be able to come to Zumeri Park and catch rainbow trout. So we should get a few hundred pounds of rainbow trout. Also, I'd like to have Mr. Starwood come up, please. Has a few words he'd like to say.
Hey, I just wanted to ask a question of you. I've come to this board five.
One sec.
Your name and address.
Yes.
My name is Vincent Starwood. My address is 216 Choctaw Road, Lafayette, Louisiana. I own a lot of property in Hammond, but I've been to this board 5 times and been denied 5 times for things that you guys approved for other people. Just recently, I was denied for, well, I have a revocation in for a land that you guys are getting ready to vote on, just on the other side of my land. You're gonna vote on it tonight, but mine was pulled from the agenda. No reason, no phone call, no anything. I was at a planning meeting, and I got denied to put a duplex on some land that's zoned to be a duplex, when the gentleman right 300 yards from me put the same variance in that's not zoned for a duplex, didn't have enough land, and he still put 2 duplexes with not enough land. I got denied to put 1. It's like every time I freaking come here, I get denied, and I sit here and watch other people get approved for the exact same thing. So I'm just trying to figure out where is this consistency, or is there even laws that we following? Or are we just doing things based off of feelings? Because like this thing that tonight that you're gonna vote on for Mr. Wells and Ms. Lily Scott, who I have her obituary, he's been dead since 1985, so how the hell would she even get something on here? But I'm here live, kicking and well, and mine gets pulled from the freaking agenda. I just don't understand what's going on. But you guys are gonna vote for it, because I'm not one of those people, 40 years in the military, don't care about the man next to me. So I'm not gonna get in the way of Mr. Wells, Adrian Wells' blessing for you guys to vote for whatever you're gonna vote for. But this is the exact freaking thing that you just pulled from me that should have been voted at the same time. The land actually connects. I just don't understand it. So every time I come here, it's no, 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 but I'm spending this hard-earned money that I got to put something in front of you guys, and you guys just deny me with not even a question. Like, I don't even, to this day, don't even know why mine was pulled from the agenda. I just drove all the way from Lafayette to be here to a meeting that I don't even have. Not a phone call, not a letter in the mail, not any freaking thing. So, I mean, I just need some answers what's going on. Do we have a regulation to follow, or are we just doing what we want to do around here?
I don't think this isn't the same thing that what you were coming up for. I think you were asking for a variance, I think, to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
No, I
put a
was
double
asking.
in a smaller lot that wasn't required, wasn't it? 10,000 square feet, and I think you were trying to put a double on a 7,200 square foot. Or
I was trying to put a duplex on 6,700 square foot where it was required 10,000. Mr. Wells right here, a year from me, got approved to put 2 duplexes on less land that's not even zoned for a duplex. No, this is public record, you can request it.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I knew the last time y'all were up here, I went to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think a representative for you were here, I think last couple weeks ago for
Right.
planning, and that's all I was told, heard.
yeah, but I mean,
It was-
but you denied
the minimum
something
was
that this person
10,000,
could get.
yeah.
And I'm just
Yeah.
using him as an example, but I don't live here, but I'm here every other day. And I'm watching, I come to these meetings, I watch them online, and I watch people get approved for the exact freaking thing that I asked for. I had land by the park that I tried to sell to the city. Well, the city wanted to buy it. City got denied for buying it, no reason. Then I tried to change it from residential to commercial because everything around it is commercial. This get denied. And then I watch you go right here by the airport and approve a whole freaking thing of commercial land. you change it from residential to commercial. I'm like, there's no consistency here, man. We just like, it's like you guys just get in a huddle and come out and be as it may. But at the end of the day, I keep losing money and time to come here to ask for something that already, I mean, right now you get ready to vote on something, the privilege of the guy you get ready to vote on, he don't even have to show up to this crap, and you guys go vote on it, and it's gonna get approved, and I hope it does, because I'm not here to hinder him from getting his way. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell's going on with me. Because if there's a personal vendetta, let me know what it is.
Well, I can say this here on purchasing the city purchasing the property from you. That's something that the administration took off, and you and I talked about it.
No, we didn't talk. You talk.
Hold up. No, this is what I told you. I said the administration took it off, and it was based on a generator that we had cut funds for the generator, but your property wasn't supposed to be taken off of there. So the administration took the property off of there.
So, but in this day
and
and
I
age,
told
you
you,
can't fix.
huh?
In this day and age, you can't clarify that before you vote on something.
That's
But,
not,
but I'm not even here to worry about that part. That's here and gone. But right now, I'm talking. Well, you're getting ready to vote on some land for the exact same thing that I put in for, but mine was pulled from the agenda. But this guy's wasn't pulled from the agenda. Our lands connect. We asked for the exact same thing. So why is his here and mine's not?
Well, I could tell you about the generator.
I don't care about a freaking generator. I
Okay,
want to know
well.
what I just paid for. Why are you not voting on that tonight? Why is mine pulled from the record? But you're gonna vote on this, and this lady's been dead since 1985. But you're here voting on something for her and your cousin, and you're gonna approve it, which I hope you do. But I don't really care. I want to know why is mine not here to be voted on.
So every time you have issues, and let's sit here and say it now that we're talking, from the trailers, everything you tried to do, where have I been with you? And don't, I
It's not
tell,
a point. I don't
no,
want
no,
somebody to
no,
hold my hand. I've been
no,
far from
no,
town
you
since
done
about
brought it
9.
up. You done brought it up. Now we're gonna talk about it.
We're not
or
going to
we're
talk
not?
about. We're going to talk about why the hell my thing isn't here to be voted on tonight. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm through
That's
with it.
water under the bridge. But you went to the council and pulled it. You went to the planning declared and pulled it. Just like this morning, I went to the court to evict someone from one of my properties, and Mr. Wells' name's come up again. Mr. Wells says you can't evict me because this property belongs to the city. Who that? Are you my manager? Because last time I looked, I'm sole proprietor. I own every freaking thing on my own. So I don't know why you or anyone else is speaking on my behalf.
And what Mr. Wells? Now you know there's a lot of
No,
Mr. Wells.
your name.
And what did I say?
Well, you told a gentleman that I evicted this morning that it was illegal for me to evict. You're giving legal advice now, I guess, from council. I don't know what's going on. But my job here today is to find out why you're going to vote on this particular item.
Well, I think,
not mine.
for one thing, though, let me tell you this here for the record, and I tell everybody, every time they mention your name, this is what I tell them. Nope, I'm not going to have this discussion with you. Well, one thing I do like, we see how the meeting started out, and that's a good thing that the mayor did that, so we're going to see how the meeting going in. So that was under the mayor report, what just took place.
I have one question of the mayor before we move forward. Back on that information you gave at the beginning about the trash, could you repeat that again?
tree debris.
Yeah, tree debris is.
So all the debris, the final pass pickup and weigh of debris will be February 18th.
Okay.
But that does not include, it does not include the
Stumps.
Right.
Okay.
So,
final pass to pick it up will be February 18th. That'll be the beginning of it.
Okay.
so on this debris, this still under the FEMA and parish, or
Correct.
this under the city? So when will it go up under the city
When they
and
finish-
and FEMA?
When they decide to quit picking up and they think that they've done everything they can do and the parish agrees, then it'll be on us.
So then the city will take over from, what's the date was again?
Well, February 18th is when they start, so if we can keep giving them debris to pick up, they'll stay around till it's finished. But once it starts stopping and there's nothing else for them to pick up,
Okay, so at this point, we still need to continue to provide information if we're seeing it, if we're receiving calls on it still.
Addresses,
Okay.
I don't know if we've done it, but can we put that on Facebook, on the city's page, so that people know that? Because I do get it, that was one of my questions tonight, was regarding the last, because the FEMA guys are telling people, yeah, we're gone next week, and then I'm sure y'all have gotten it too. Everybody calls in a panic because they haven't finished their removal of contents and construction debris.
just give us addresses and we'll call directly.
Will do.
Yeah, well, I have an address on Brent Street, right off of Mississippi Street, and the trucks can't get back there because the limbs are too low on Brent Street. They got 2 houses on Brent Street, right off of Mississippi Street, that the debris is on.
You have the address?
Only 2 houses on Brent Street off of Mississippi Street. So you'll see the debris. I definitely know about that one.
I wanted to get a follow-up. Talked to Robert a while back, last week, I think, on the timber lane lights, about the boring contract, to bore in the front. I'm getting a few calls again, because it's been several months, 7 months without lights on that street, Timber Lane Whole Street. So if we can get an update on exactly when the boring contract is going to go in effect and start, and the contractor is going to start the project to where we can get some lights on Timber Lane.
I know there were several locations they were needing to bore at in order to make
Yeah.
those improvements. And I know I signed a purchase order today for one of those locations. I don't know if it's Timber Lane, but we can find that out for you in the
Please do,
morning.
yeah. Thank you.
Doing council reports?
Yeah.
Okay. I had 2 questions. One was the debris pass, so you've already hit that. The other one was, do we have any update on the salary study?
Sure, we actually had a meeting this morning with the consultants. They are coming on February 4th, that's a Friday, to meet with all the department heads to review again job descriptions and structures within those departments, and then also talk about recruiting or retaining employee challenges. And they've already reviewed all of the job descriptions up to this point for every employee throughout the city. And they've already started putting those into a matrix, and they've already called several other municipalities and similar entities to get their salary information, and I know they've already received several of those. I don't know how many of those are still pending, but they're making good progress. We are hoping that we have a report in hand, some sort of draft of a report or some sort of initial numbers by the end of February, early March.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we heard anything on the redistricting?
That's actually going to be one of the items for tonight, and Mr. Blair is looking to meet with each of you, and so if you could look at your calendars, I think he's going to reach out to you independently, but if you could kind of look at your calendars, he may be throwing a couple of dates in the next following couple of weeks. Just kind of a reminder, I think he's trying to have everything in place by April time period, because I believe May 8th is our deadline to meet for charter and for election purposes. So I think he's looking for April to kind of sit down with each of you, but he wants to sit down and talk to you well before that, but that's kind of the final deadlines. Looking at public hearings and all those kinds of things would happen in March, April time period.
Anyone else from the council? Okay. Mike.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Codrain. I'm Michael Adams, an attorney from Baton Rouge. I'm here with Seth Stroughton. And he said I was going to mess his name up, so I wanted to make sure I did that. It's been almost 2 years since we started this endeavor, and so we want you to know that we're done. We're finished. And tonight, we are submitting to you our report, our final report. Nobody has seen this yet on the council. We wanted to give it at the same time. What you have here is the report as well as a thumb drive containing the electronic version of the report. along with some notes. What I want to do at this point is, there was a lot of conversation on whether or not or how we would render our findings. We spent a lot of time with interviews, with depositions, with looking at documents. There has even been some litigation over whether or not certain officers would talk to us. So we employed the expertise of Seth Stoughton. Professor Stoughton is a full-time faculty member at the University of South Carolina School of Law. He teaches criminal law and criminal procedure. He has published extensively in the areas of policing, police tactics, use of force, and investigations. He's authored a textbook and many articles on use of force. He has provided use of force training for the city of Chicago and many other cities around the country, and advisory councils. And he has been used and retained as an expert and has testified as an expert in federal and state courts around the country. He was recently used as a testifying expert in the Derek Chauvin trial after the killing of George Floyd. He actually testified as an expert on use of force in that case. I think that once you hear his presentation, you will come to no other conclusion but the one we did, that we have some very stark, serious recommendations we're making to this council. We stand behind those recommendations, and we ask that you seriously consider taking those recommendations and moving forward. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Professor Stoughton.
Thank you very much for inviting me today to give this presentation on the report. I regret to inform you it is in the form of a PowerPoint. Nobody likes PowerPoints, but I will do my best to avoid death by PowerPoint. So by way of brief overview, the presentation today, I will try and keep it as concise as I can. The report that I handed out, I'll talk more about that in just a little bit, but you can see it is quite voluminous. So what I will hit are some of the high points. We'll talk, or I will talk a little bit about the retention and investigative activity that I engaged in. I'll talk about the framework for the investigative findings.
Sir, please talk in the mic where everybody can hear you, please. Make sure it might be off.
How about now?
Better.
There it is. Do you want me to start all the way over? Ooh, I'm going to have to work on this one. All right, so I'll talk about my retention and investigative activity subject to the retention, the framework for the investigative findings that I'll lay out for you today, the actual factual findings and conclusions that I came to, as well as other information and allegations that I learned of during the course of the investigation. These will be the four basic parts of the presentation today. The third one, factual findings and conclusions, will probably be the one that takes the most time. And then I'll finish briefly with recommendations. As Mike mentioned, I was retained on December 7th of 2020. I began investigating on April 17th, 2021. Since that time, there were a series of investigative steps, including reviewing a series of materials that were provided both initially and over the course of the retention. I came here as well as conducted telephonic investigative interviews, did a site visit to the Hammond Police Department's booking room, and as is sitting in front of you, compiled a written report with conclusions and recommendations. That written report is a 158-page report. The date on the front is January 18th. The date on the electronic copy, which is included on the flash drive that accompanies all of your reports, is January 19th. It has a couple of minor revisions that are limited to formatting and typographical errors. There is no substantive difference, although some of the page numbers may be a little different because of the formatting issues. To provide a brief overview of the report, there is an executive summary and recommendations at the beginning, a section on administrative information, a section dedicated to the booking room incident itself, both a factual summary, that is what I was able to determine about what actually happened, as well as the conclusions that I drew from my understanding of what actually happened, and then other information and allegations provided. As an initial matter, I want to point out that the framework for limiting for the investigative findings is limited to the information that I obtained in the investigation. That is, as an investigator, I am limited to the information that is provided to me. I do not view it as my job as drawing credibility determinations. So when there are conflicting pieces of evidence, say 2 inconsistent statements, in the report and in this presentation, I will identify that there are 2 conflicting statements or descriptions about a piece of evidence, but without objective evidence, like video, for example, I do not attempt to resolve that. So if person A says one thing and person B says something else, without objective evidence like video, I can't tell you whether person A or person B is correct. What I can do is just lay out the 2 different sides of that particular story for your review. The factual findings and conclusions start with the arrest and transport of Mr. Kendrick Ratliff. Mr. Ratliff was lawfully arrested. His vehicle was obstructing part of the roadway and sidewalk. That is a lawful reason for arrest. There is a factual dispute related to the search of his vehicle. Specifically, officer statements are that he consented to a search of his vehicle. His sworn testimony is that he did not consent to a search of his vehicle. That factual dispute prevents me from reaching a conclusion as to the lawfulness of the search of his vehicle. There is some evidence that officers may have failed to properly apply and secure Mr. Ratliff's handcuffs. And then when transported, there is evidence that the Hammond Police Department, which you'll see as HPD, the HPD policy relating to the use of the handcuffs in the booking room was not consistently understood by HPD employees. These are opinions, or these relate to opinions 1 through 4 in the report. Unless there are specific questions, I'd like to move on to the ones that are perhaps a little bit more complicated. Not seeing any. Most of my opinions and most of the analysis in this case related to the uses of force. While he was handcuffed in the booking room, Mr. Ratliff reached for evidence, specifically a couple of pill bottles that had been placed up on the desk. And when he did so, he was not secured to the handcuff bar. There's a brief video of the relevant information here. It's at this point that officers began using force, and before I get into the details of that, I want to tell you how I analyze a use of force incident, or rather how they should be analyzed. Officers can use force in the course of their jobs. It is an inherent part of policing, maybe the most important part of policing. The fact that an officer used force doesn't establish that the officer did anything wrong, because officers can legitimately use force in the course of their duties. But not for any reason at all. An officer who is irritated at someone cannot use force for the sake of irritation. Force can only be used to address an imminent threat, and policing understands that a threat is imminent when the subject reasonably appears to have the ability, opportunity, and intention to cause a specific harm. Ability means the physical capability to do something. For example, someone with a tire iron has the physical ability to hit someone with that blunt instrument in a way that someone without a tire iron doesn't. Opportunity refers to vulnerability, essentially. Someone with a tire iron might have the physical ability to attack an officer with that tire iron, but if the officer is a half a mile away, they don't have the opportunity to do so. And finally, intention is exactly what it sounds like. Does the person reasonably appear to intend to cause that particular type of harm? I want to emphasize that particular type of harm because there is no such thing as a threat in the generic sense. Threats are specific. It is a threat of being attacked with a tire iron, for example, a threat of being stabbed or shot, a threat of someone escaping or running away. When that situation exists, we have satisfied the first step of analysis, which is essentially asking whether officers were entitled to use some amount of force. In the absence of an imminent threat, the answer is no. In the absence of an imminent threat, officers do not get to use force. But even if there is an imminent threat that justifies the use of some force, there is an additional step, which is whether the force used was proportional to the threat presented. At a very basic level, excessive force is when officers use more force than is justified by the threat presented before them. Importantly, the assessment that this requires is made from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene. That is, we don't look at it with what the Supreme Court has referred to as the 20/20 vision of hindsight. We ask, from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, did the subject present some imminent threat? And if so, what was the level of force that would be proportional to that threat? I apologize for slipping into lecture mode. I do think it's important to lay out the basic framework for getting into the actual uses of force in this case. There were 10 identifiable uses of force in the booking room incident. Let's see if I can get the clicky working. I cannot get the clicky working. There were 10 identifiable uses of force. This chart summarizes them with a description of the force used, the officer, officers involved, and very, very briefly, my conclusion about them. The first was a series of closed-fisted strikes to Mr. Ratliff's face and body by then Sergeant Bergeron and Officer Dunn. I apologize for getting any titles wrong. For the sake of convenience, I will use the officers' titles as they existed in December of 2017. In my opinion, the strikes, especially the strikes to Mr. Ratliff's face, were egregiously unreasonable and excessive for reasons that I will explain. The second use of force was Officer Dunn kicking Mr. Ratliff in the neck. My conclusion as to that use of force is that it was unreasonable and excessive. The third was a particular type of front naked choke called a guillotine chokehold, again used by Officer Dunn. That was also egregiously unreasonable and excessive. The fourth was a knee strike to Mr. Ratliff's left side by then Sergeant Bergeron. In my opinion, that knee strike was reasonable under the circumstances. Next, a series of taser discharges to Mr. Ratliff's back and side by Officer Tabler, also reasonable. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that's cutting off. There was a period of prolonged prone restraint. I'll talk more about that momentarily, by all of the officers who were involved most intimately at the point, Officer Dunn and Officer Gautier, also unreasonable. An officer, although it is not entirely clear who, an officer that I believe to be Officer Dunn, knelt with his knee or shin on Mr. Ratliff's neck while he was both prone, that is face down, and supine, or face up. In my view, that was unreasonable. Officer Gautier used a hyper-flexing wrist lock, a pain compliance technique that was unreasonable. And I apologize, it might be the resolution of this screen, but it's actually cutting off a little bit at the bottom. Enough makes sense. There's enough there to make it out, though. The ninth use of force was a kick to Mr. Ratliff's groin or thigh. I have A and B there because it's not clear where that strike actually impacted. There is a factual dispute on that point. If that strike was to Mr. Ratliff's groin, it was egregiously unreasonable. If to his thigh, it was unreasonable. And finally, a series of stomps or kicks to Mr. Ratliff's face by Officer Dunn that, in my view, were egregiously unreasonable. What I'd like to do is briefly go over the uses of force that were either egregiously unreasonable or unreasonable, and as concise a fashion as I can manage, explain the justification for those opinions. Starting with the closed-fisted strikes, this is a video of the relevant information, the relevant period of time. In the video, what you're going to see is first a full-speed version of the video, followed by a reduced speed at about 50, well, at exactly 50% of the speed. The second portion of the video is cropped, so it's zoomed in to the extent that I can zoom in on the relevant events. and it is silenced to avoid the weirdness that comes from slow motion video. What you see in this video is Mr. Ratliff reaching for the medication that's being used, or the pill bottles, medicine bottles that are being used as evidence, when he is on his back, supine face up on the desk. Then Sergeant Bergeron struck him 6 times with his right hand. Although not clear from the video, Mr. Ratliff's testimony is that at least some of those strikes struck him in the face, and Officer Dunn using his left hand to strike Mr. Ratliff 3 times. At this point, Mr. Ratliff is in handcuffs, face up on a desk, and while his actions do involve some level of resistance, the threat he presents is relatively minimal. He's not going to escape. At best, he is going to frustrate officers in their attempt to separate him from the evidence that he's holding in his handcuffed hand. The use of force, on the other hand, especially the strikes to the face, are quite significant. They are highly likely, close-fisted strikes to the face are highly likely to result in substantial bodily harm, damaging the teeth, the cheekbones, the eye, the structures of the face, the neck, and the like. For this reason, policing has generally accepted that officers should not use close-fisted strikes on subjects' faces, except when serious force is justified. There is no such justification here. In my view, the use of the closed-fisted strikes are unreasonable, and the use of closed-fisted strikes to the face are egregiously unreasonable in the situation. If there are any questions about these, I'm happy to take them as we come. Otherwise, I'll keep moving on. The next use of force is Officer Dunn's kick to the neck. This video picks up at approximately the time that the last video ended. Within a second of Sergeant Bergeron saying handcuff off, you see Officer Dunn here with his right foot kicking forward into Mr. Ratliff. That kick, again, the target is obscured on the camera. According to Mr. Ratliff, that kick struck him in the neck. A kick to the neck is simply unjustified given the situation. The next use of force involves the guillotine choke. And if I can direct you to page 82 of the report in front of you, there is a picture to illustrate the application of a guillotine choke. It is a brand of what's referred to as a front naked choke. Front because that is the direction from which the person is applying the choke. Naked because it does not involve any clothing. It is basically just the arm against the person's neck. To apply a guillotine choke, what you're doing is bringing the blade of the arm, the radius bone of the arm, which is the long bone that runs along the side of the thumb, into the trachea, esophagus, or neck muscles of the person who is on the receiving end of that. It is a variety of choke. In the report, I detail the different types of chokes, particularly the distinction between a respiratory choke and what's sometimes referred to as a blood choke, or in policing more typically known as a neck restraint. A guillotine choke is a respiratory choke. That is, it prevents someone from breathing. It is not a neck restraint that restricts flow of blood to the brain. This is the initial application of the guillotine choke. The position is held for some period of time, but Sergeant Bergeron is in the way of the camera, so I don't have that entire length of video. You can find that on the flash drives that accompany this report. At one point, Officer Dunn shifts onto his back and butt and cocks his hips forward. Mr. Adams, may I borrow you? With respect. So when you're applying a guillotine choke, the way to increase the pressure is to cant your hips forward, so you are rotating your shoulders and your arm back and pressing up. It's quite uncomfortable. You see at the end of that video, you see Officer Dunn doing exactly that. Respiratory chokes are generally accepted within policing as an application of deadly force. And deadly force is appropriate if and only if there's an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. In this case, Mr. Ratliff's handcuff has come off. That is, he has a handcuff on his left hand. His right hand is not in handcuffs, but he is on his hands and knees. There is no evidence that he presented a significant threat of physical harm, let alone an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. The application of deadly force in such circumstances is egregiously unreasonable. The next use of force to discuss is the prone restraint. This video kicks on after Mr. Ratliff has been handcuffed again, so he has been re-secured in handcuffs, and he is held in a face-down or prone position. It's about 90 seconds of video, but there is no slow-motion version. So when Officer Goldman and the other officer arrive, they're told code 4. Code 4, the situation is under control. You can see in the video at this point, both from Mr. Ratliff's buttocks as well as the angle of his feet, that he is face down on the ground as opposed to being on his side or back. And when then Officer Tabor moves, you can see Officer Dunn putting some weight on his middle or upper back. The prone position is a particularly useful one in policing because it's very difficult for someone to fight effectively when they are face down, and it's relatively easy for officers to control their hands. For that reason, it's very common for officers to use the prone position to get someone into handcuffs, to get someone restrained. However, for about 30 years, there's been very strong guidance in policing that after someone has been restrained, after they have been secured in handcuffs, you take them out of the prone position. The prone position carries a significant risk of what's called positional asphyxia. It makes it difficult for someone in that position to breathe. I will refer you to the George Floyd case, for example. There are some specific aggravating factors that can increase the potential for someone to suffer positional asphyxia, including drug intoxication. In this case, I will remind you, Mr. Ratliff was arrested and thought to be in possession of drugs. The use of the prone restraint for the prolonged period that we see here is unreasonable. The correct response, and this is generally accepted in policing, is to take someone out of the prone position as promptly as the situation allows, certainly no more than a few seconds after they are handcuffed. I do not have a video of this. This is information that comes from Mr. Ratliff. I could not independently confirm it by watching on the video. I have no information that contradicts it directly, however. According to Mr. Ratliff, the only evidence that I have, an officer believed, but I am not completely sure to be Officer Dunn, knelt across his neck with his knee or shin on or across Mr. Ratliff's neck while he was handcuffed. According to Mr. Ratliff, this position was both while he was face down, as you saw in the prone restraint video, as well as after he was turned face up. This is not an approved position for officers to stay in. It might be the type of position that officers might hit in a very transitory way while they're wrestling with someone, but it is not a control position. If you think of the neck and body as, if you think of the neck as kind of like a suspension bridge, when someone is face down on the ground, their head and their chest are making contact with the body, the neck is not, and extensive pressure, downward pressure on the neck can actually damage the neck, including severing the spinal column. There are, unfortunately, several cases like that. When someone is face up on the ground, of course, a knee across their neck would be across their throat, which is also problematic. So knee or shin on the neck would be unreasonable under the circumstances. This would be after, again, Mr. Ratliff had been secured in handcuffs. The next use of force is wrist lock. We'll see it here. What you see here is Officer Gautier, after lifting Mr. Ratliff, who was still prone at the time, pulling his hand out of Mr. Ratliff's grip, and then grabbing Mr. Ratliff's hand and pushing it down. What he's doing with his hand is a hyper-flexing wrist lock known as a gooseneck. If you take one hand and sort of fold it down and push on your own knuckles with the other hand, you can simulate the type of pain compliance hold that this causes. There is no justification for this at the time that Officer Gautier applies it. Mr. Ratliff may have grabbed his hand immediately prior, but as you saw from the video, Officer Gautier had no trouble extracting his hand from Mr. Ratliff, who was fully under the control of officers. There was no reason to re-engage and use a pain compliance technique under the circumstances. Picking up immediately where that video left off, there is a kick to the thigh or groin by Sergeant Mashinsky. Again, at the time, Mr. Ratliff is fully under the control of officers. He's been handcuffed. You can see then Sergeant Bergeron standing there on his phone. Sergeant Mashinsky walks in and kicks. There is a factual dispute as to the target of that kick. According to Sergeant Mashinsky, he was aiming for and struck Mr. Ratliff in the inner thigh. According to Mr. Ratliff, he was struck in the groin. I do not have any objective evidence indicating one is right and the other is wrong. I cannot resolve that factual dispute. My opinion, as indicated earlier, is that if that kick was targeted at and struck Mr. Ratliff in the groin, it is egregiously unreasonable. If it was to his thigh, it was unreasonable. The last use of force is Officer Dunn. This one happens in a relatively small portion of the frame, so I will attempt to direct you as appropriate here. If you look around where Officer Gautier's head is right there and you see the movement of Officer Dunn's foot, at this point, Mr. Ratliff is face up on the ground. You're looking in the bottom third center of the frame here. You see Officer Dunn kicking backward several times with one foot, and then, although not clear from the video, stepping down with the other foot. I counted a total of 5 stomps or kicks. This is egregiously unreasonable. It is among the most abusive uses of force I have seen in reviewing. I can't even tell you how many cases. That's all for the actual uses of force. I'd like to pause to see if there are any questions about this point before I continue.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sir.
On page 74 in the book.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I heard you say that that Ratcliffe, he still had his handcuffs on at the time Bourgeron was punching him. So he still had his handcuffs at the time that Bourgeron was punching him?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, the handcuffs did not come off. There, as you'll see in the full body of the report, there is a dispute about how exactly the handcuffs came off, but it is very clear that they did not come off until Mr. Ratliff was on the ground after the image that you see here in this on page 74.
Okay, thank you.
After the use of force, Officer Dunn wrote a report. His report omitted material information, including most of the uses of force that we just went over. It did not discuss, for example, his stomps or kicks. It did not discuss the chokehold or the like. It also included some information as follows: that Mr. Ratliff rolled on top of him and was reaching for his handgun, pulling on the grip and holster. This is obviously a very high-risk description that would generally be considered a deadly force situation. But the actions of the officers at the time, as well as officers' later verbal statements and the video evidence that we see, is not consistent with that description. In relevant part, prior to Mr. Ratliff being in any position that could be described as on top of Officer Dunn, you'll see the positioning here. Mr. Ratliff is on his hands and knees with Officer Dunn on top of him. This is immediately prior to, there's the transition to the guillotine choke. Sergeant Bergeron's knee strike. This is cropped in so you can see Officer Dunn's firearm, and in all of the available video, Mr. Ratliff's hand is nowhere near that, nor could it access it from that position. No other officer documented the incident. That's in violation of both generally accepted policing practices as well as the policies of the Hammond Police Department. And according to at least one witness's sworn testimony, two supervisors, including then Sergeant Bergeron, instructed him to not document the incident. There is, for example, no taser report, despite two taser applications in this case, because the officer who discharged the taser later in deposition informed us that he was instructed to not document the incident. Then Chief Stewart opened an internal affairs investigation into Sergeant Mashinsky's use of force. That was the only aspect of this incident that he opened an investigation into. This was a significant abdication of leadership on his part. The internal investigation that was conducted failed to meet professional standards. Namely, relevant witnesses were not interviewed. Only a very small subset of the officers who were interviewed there, who were on the video there, were actually interviewed. The interview involved leading questions and failed to obtain relevant information. And in his report, Sergeant McCormick mischaracterized one of the witness statements. That concludes the factual information and conclusions about the booking incident itself. In the course of speaking to the witnesses in this case, Mr. Adams and I were provided with a variety of information that was beyond the scope of our review of the booking incident. Under the direction of Council President Andrews and Councilman DiVittorio, we made appropriate but limited inquiries to allow for documentation of that additional information and allegations without doing any additional investigation into those matters. So what you'll see in the report and what I'm going to talk about here are information and allegations that were provided to us. I do not have any conclusions related to these, as they are outside the scope of what I was hired to actually investigate. That's a brief summary of what I just said. I should have clicked more promptly. First, the allegation that HPD correctional officers failed to supervise a prisoner who committed suicide as a result, that officers in the street crimes unit either failed to or were reluctant to get medical clearance for arrestees who were injured or complaining of injury, that the mayor was involved in police department operations, including employee discipline, employee assignments, the uniform policy, in a way that undermined the chain of command. Allegations of favoritism within the agency, both mayoral favoritism in discipline and agency operations, and favoritism on behalf of now Chief Bergeron in discipline and the application of agency policies. Allegations of retaliation by Chief Bergeron. Allegations that on-duty police department resources were diverted and assigned to work a private event. Allegations that potential off-duty misconduct involving another sergeant, Sergeant Payne, were covered up by the agency. Allegations of inappropriate workplace comments and hostile work environment on sexual orientation grounds specifically. Allegations of racial and gender inequities. Preferential treatment for confidential informants. The allegation that street crimes unit arrest statistics are artificially inflated, that family members are in a position of direct report, that is, within the chain of command, one family member reports immediately to or supervises an immediate family member. Allegations that HPD employees were not provided with or trained on agency policy, did not get sufficient legal training, and, probably least importantly, that the organizational chart is not accurate. As you'll see in the written report, there are a series of 17 recommendations. I want to briefly go over the first three. They are in rough order of entirely subjective importance on my part. The first, especially based on the additional information that was provided in the section of the report in this presentation called Other Information and Allegations, I recommend that the city conduct a comprehensive review of the police department and its operations. There are a list of specific topics in recommendation 1, which you will find on page Romanet 4, little IV, at the beginning, in the executive summary and recommendations section. The second recommendation is that the City of Hammond should refer the booking room incident to appropriate authorities for an assessment of whether any HPD employees committed a crime. As you know, this was not a disciplinary investigation. Given Louisiana law, there is no room for discipline here, and this is not a criminal investigation. I do not have any criminal investigation authority in Louisiana. So my second recommendation is that this body refer the booking room incident to appropriate authorities for an assessment of criminal activity. And the third is that the city should conduct targeted investigations into several specific incidents or allegations, specifically the allegation that HPD employees failed to supervise the booking facility leading to a prisoner's suicide, that the department covered up an incident in which an employee was reportedly involved in an off-duty altercation, and the allegation that Chief Bergeron diverted on-duty resources to a private event. There are, as I mentioned, additional recommendations in the report itself, both the hard copy and the electronic copies. I appreciate the opportunity to serve you and your community here in Hammond, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sir.
Cut the light. So at this here time here, and right now, we truly have an issue protecting the citizens of Hammond. And from what I see, it brings tears to me. It brings tears to me because from all them officers that I saw in that video, and it's the first time it ever been broken down that you can actually see everything in detail. And I guess this from the administration. Are those officers still working for the city of Hammond?
Yes, they are.
Good. Okay. Now, you, sir, the question for you. What do you recommend, or can you recommend, what steps we need to take? Because I know the officer they couldn't get subpoenaed, so that was end up being a held up. So if you can, what do you recommend what we do next? Because I'm talking about, from what I see, we actually have a real problem here. And from myself, being a black male, I'm scared. But from a regular citizen, white or black, we know it don't matter when it comes to color when these things take place. So what do you recommend, can you, for us going to the state or the FBI? What are the next steps that we need to do where this won't happen to nobody else in this here area or in Tangipahoa Parish, period?
Thank you for that question, Councilman. I'm limited in my ability to provide specific recommendations. Not being your legal counsel, I'll refer to City Attorney Cotrain for issues relating to employment and actions. As you'll see in the executive summary and recommendations, one of the things that I recommend with recommendation 2, which was referring the matter of the booking room incident for criminal assessment, is this is on page little v, Romanet 5 in the executive summary and recommendations. There are a series of entities that I think the matter should be referred, to which the matter should be referred. The local district attorney's office, the office of the attorney general, the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Louisiana, as well as the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. The Civil Rights Division has a criminal enforcement bureau. They often rely on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, to conduct preliminary investigations into a particular a violation of a particular statute, 18 U.S.C. 242, which is a willful deprivation of constitutional rights. It is not my role to come here and say whether officers did or did not commit a crime under Louisiana law. I'm not an expert in Louisiana law, but I think that the matter certainly merits serious consideration by those who are experts in Louisiana law. With regard to the police department as a whole, one of the the very first recommendation is a more serious review of the police department and its operations. A review that there are a number of entities that can conduct that review. Having conducted this review, I am not one of them, so I'm not suggesting that you have me come back and to do any additional review. I am off the table, having been conflicted out by working on this review. But there are a number of entities that have a great deal of experience in reviewing police agencies and their operations, OIR Group, CNA Solutions, I named several others in the recommendation itself. There are some very specific parts of department operations that I would suggest having reviewed. I didn't put it in the slide. This is on page 4 of the executive summary and recommendations. The first of which is use of force. I am looking at one particular incident, but it is, I would say it is not at all uncommon that when there is one particular problem that comes to light, that there are other problems that have not fully come to light yet. I'm not saying that that is the case here. I don't know, but I am saying that there is enough information for me to recommend that the city figure that out. There are a series of other recommendations that I didn't get into that may be of some interest. I'm happy to engage with those when you have the opportunity to review them. One of the things that I will bring to your attention, just since it's come up, you see the number of officers who are standing around and no one is doing anything. The Hammond Police Department did not have at the time, and I may be wrong, but I do not believe it currently has, an intervention policy, which are increasingly common and certainly part of generally accepted police practices. One of the recommendations is the police department adopt an intervention policy and provide officers with appropriate training. Just by way of very specific, beyond just saying, do another review. That's all. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So, at this time, Mr. President, Andre, I would like to add 2 resolutions to the agenda.
You just need to tell the council what those resolutions are. And probably, I guess you could do that now. We're still under reports. But I see no reason why you couldn't make that motion now and whatever the agenda item is and call for a vote. That would require a unanimous vote of the council to add an item to the agenda.
Okay. All right. The first one, I'd like to make a resolution that the city council make a formal request to the FBI, Louisiana State Police, Louisiana Attorney General Office, and any other agent recommend the civil service right by the city attorney to investigate this report. So what would be the next step on this here?
That's your motion to add that item to the agenda?
Yes.
So we need a second.
Second.
Aye.
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 No? No. Let me just state, we've just been given a 130-something page report. And it's not, I don't think it's appropriate to add a resolution in here before I've had a chance to read it. I'm happy to put it on the next agenda so that we can properly discuss it. And I do believe, if I'm not correct, we've already once talked about referring this entire thing to some of those authorities, and that didn't happen. We got an expert instead. So I just want a chance to review the report.
And I'd like to piggyback on that as well. I mean, for almost a year, they've had time to look at all of this, put this enormous report together, and in 30 minutes, we get presented with it, and then we're asked to make a decision. I'm not against making a decision. I'm not against this resolution, but I have some time to process. I'd like to take this material, read over it, process it, but I don't think tonight's the appropriate time to vote on something like this.
And for the record, I asked to see a copy of this last week. I understand that it was decided that we would all get it all at once, but had I maybe gotten it a week ago and had a chance to read it, I might have been able to give you some actual thought on this amended resolution item and probably the next one.
And I want to make clear right here, I want to state, anybody who watched this video tonight and seen the video, it's been around for a while, it's disturbing, and I respect and I support law enforcement, that we need law enforcement, I support good law enforcement, but watching that video, to me, there really shouldn't be much else to see. That is just completely uncalled for, just disgusting video out that we watched. The awful sounds the guy made, it was clear. I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than that. And then to promote a guy in administration to recommend his promotion after knowing this and bringing it to us when we first got in, it's very sad to know that. And then we did not have this information to us. So I just want to make that clear. You know, there's a lot of good officers out there, but that video, it was disturbing and disgusting. So, thank you.
Another thing, December the 2017, that's when this took place. And here it is, 2022. And we want to still play cat and mouse. It's not fair to the residents, to the citizens of Hammond for this to take place. And now we so quiet like ain't nothing happened. I don't even know Radcliffe. I'm one of the ones who voted on the chief based on what he told me. But the mayor rushed this down our throats so fast, all of us was new. We just got in office and didn't know what was going on. Yes, they sent us a 20-second clip of the video. We didn't see it. I didn't see it. And now we still playing cat and mouse with the citizens of Hammond. Andre, once again, I have another resolution.
Before you move to that next resolution, I just want to make one thing clear. Councilwoman Gonzalez did ask for a copy of the report, but the last meeting that we had with the attorney, the decision was made that this report would be given at one time to everybody that's sitting around this table. That way everybody would receive it at the same time, and the question that would be asked at the same time. No information was given to me or Councilman DiVittorio in that meeting on the phone. Just the decision was made to present this tonight in public to the council with everyone that's sitting around this table to make sure that they got a hard copy in their hand. I just want that to be clear on the record.
Well, I'd like to make another resolution. I'd like to make a resolution based upon the use of the force expert and the lawyer that the city councilman formally requests that the mayor fire Chief Bergeron immediately.
Second.
Again, this is a motion to amend the agenda, not a vote on the resolution, because that is not actually on the agenda, just to make that clear.
Yes. Yes. Aye.
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 No.
No.
I'd also like to state, it's clear that the language of both of those resolutions was prepared ahead of time, which if you want something on the agenda, I'm going to urge council members to put it on the agenda so that it's actually before us. We have time to think about it, digest it, discuss it, find out all the relevant information before we can vote on it, instead of amending the agenda after it's been posted.
I would like to say this here and let this be on the record. Now you all get a chance to see what I actually go through. The first guy come in here was Starwood on the mayor report that the attack was towards me. Not what the city did, but towards me. And it's what I learned in life. You have to watch it. Nobody see the elephant in the room. And all that was a distraction for me not to say nothing, for me to act a clown, what they expect. But what did I do? And it's amazing, for all this stuff that these lawyers been going through, for the money that it's costing the city of Hammond, not one time, and you can look, the mayor even looked to see what was going on. And he didn't have to look, because you know why? You all new to the video. He saw the video 4 years ago, so he didn't have to look up there. And just look at him now. Don't look at me, look at the mayor. He the one can stop all of this here. But you know what though? And I tell everybody this here, I mean this. When you mess with families and friends, it's hard to fire somebody. When you mess with family and friends, the mayor and the chief, they are friends. This is the problem that we're having. And for the record, I want you to know, and I mean this, because I'm running for office again. Everything that you see what's going on, pay attention to these votes, because if they mean you good And it don't matter about the color. They're gonna go for what's right and what's wrong. So pay attention to what's going on. If you don't never come to another council meeting again, you hear this from me. I'm running for office again. But all these here ones, they got these little underlying statements. Pay attention, because they want to run again. And you know, make this time when you go vote, you make the right decision. We're not going to keep making mistakes. We're going to make the right decision. So you heard it from me. I'm going to run for office again.
By the way, my statements are not underlying statements. There's a reason we have an agenda. It is so that people who care about the things we vote about know what's coming before us, and it's properly advertised, and anybody who wants to speak about it can come up here and talk about it. If it's not on the agenda, they don't know about it, and that's not fair to the people that we represent.
You want to talk about the citizen, you want to talk about the citizenship. When you do something like this, you're leaving the citizenship completely out of the loop. You put it on the agenda, you advertise it, you inform the citizenship, and then we make an informed decision. That's the process. That's what we do.
Speaking of the informing the citizens, who's in charge of the calendar on the city website? Who controls the calendar, posts when the city council meetings are?
There's several people who
Okay,
have
'cause
access to the website.
it was wrong. Yeah, it was wrong this weekend. This meeting was on Thursday, which they're never on Thursday.
Yeah.
So it was fixed. But, I mean, that's something important.
That came to my
Administration
attention, and it was
needs
fixed.
to look at the calendar and make sure they're posted correctly online. So, I mean, that's pretty important, so.
I believe that the agendas are all posted correctly, and I believe that the general people know that. But yes, that was a mistake that was made, and as soon as it came to our attention, we corrected it.
All right. Next item on the agenda, I need an approval of our minute from January 11th, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Councilman Leon,
Aye.
Councilman Wells,
Aye.
Councilman Diviterio,
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
All right, resolutions, none. Old business, none. New business, resolution number 1.
A resolution authorizing the purchase of playground equipment and installation for Jackson Park improvements for Planet Recess for a total of $59,204. Desiree Doty.
Could you hit the button? Yeah. The green, make to the green lights on.
One more time.
Can you hear me?
There-
Yeah, there we go.
Yes, unfortunately, Desiree Dory couldn't make it today. My name is Christian Muswaswa. I'm the Assistant Director. And we're trying to move forward with this process to try and see if we can get this approved.
Thank you. Wanted to ask, I saw on there where it said the rubber safety surfacing, that's going to be underneath the swing set and the play set, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then as far as the picnic tables and some trash cans added back there, are those being looked at right now, or?
Yes, they're being looked at. Once we are done with this and
Okay.
we get the total price, whatever is left, we would definitely
Okay.
add that to it.
Thank you.
Any question from anyone else from the council? Anyone from the public? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion approved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Councilman Andrews,
Aye.
Councilman Diviterio,
Aye.
Councilman Wells,
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez,
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Aye.
Okay, final adoption of ordinance. Old business, none. New business, none. All right,
Introduction, are we ready?
just go ahead.
Introduction of an ordinance to declare the malapportionment status of the current districting plan of the city's single-member election districts of the city of Hammond, utilizing the population data from 2020, from the 2020 federal decennial census and otherwise provide with respect thereto. Lacey Landrum.
This is just for introduction tonight. This is the same ordinance that Mr. Bill Blair went over with us at the prior council meeting when he talked about the overall process. This is required by law. We have to declare officially that we need to redistrict according to the statistical report that we have received from the census and those findings about the demographics. So what you have linked up is the ordinance itself that is just, according to Mr. Blair, kind of fancy language for saying we got to do something. So this just starts that process officially. You also have up the two statistical reports that show both each district and the city as a whole of what needs to happen in order to get the proper numbers for each district to be equally separated.
Any question from anyone on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilman Wells?
Aye.
Public hearing will be scheduled for February 8, 2022 at 5:30.
Number 2.
Introduction of an ordinance by Adrian and Vanessa Wells and Lily Scott to revocate a portion of Kansas Street right-of-way and re-subdivide 2 lots in Block 5 into lots 14A and 26A, Colonial Place Subdivision, located at 707 and 809 Mooney Avenue, in accordance with survey by William J. Bodine, PLS Zone RM-2. Jeffrey Leuenberger.
Yeah, this is just a right-of-way revocation. The zoning commission recommended approval on it in January 6th at the January 6th meeting. There is a water servitude that goes across that right-of-way, that there's a 10-foot servitude that is going to be preserved. But for the right-of-way itself, they recommended approval at the January 6th meeting. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Jeff, how long this process been going on? When the application was first put in?
I quite honestly can't give you a date. I think it was before I even started, so
Yes.
it's been a while.
Okay. So,
But I can't speak on the specifics as to, we've had a lot going on in the department, and so there's been a lot of turnover.
yeah,
a lot of
okay,
stuff, so-
yeah, you got a lot going on. Okay, so for the record, is there any way that you can locate that this been going on for 3 years, 4 years, 2 years?
I'd have to go back and look. Depending on when they put in the application, then yeah, we could go back and look and see how long it's been going on, assuming they put in an application.
Yeah, no, they is here. So, Adrian, could you come up, please?
Good afternoon.
They want you to give your address and your name.
Adrian Wells, Hammond, Louisiana, 811B Mooney Avenue.
And look, and this is my cousin. I'm gonna let y'all know. So, when him and I talk, we don't talk about nothing dealing with the city. And he'll tell you, for the record, anything he try to do, what do I tell you to do? Go talk to the community, don't I?
Yes.
So I'm saying this here to say this here. If the community don't want what he trying to do, I'm not gonna vote on it. So that the game you tried to play, that was good, but it's all coming to an end. I'm talking to you now, Mr. Mayor. So tell them when the first time you tried to get this here property.
Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, but on paper, probably about 2 to 3 years ago.
Okay, and in planning and zoning, when you first went up there, what did they tell you?
Really,
To your knowledge.
well, to my knowledge, they told me I couldn't get it. And then I come back again, I had to get surveyed, get all this surveyed, get it approved by the city. So a lot of runaround.
Yeah. So, and this is why I brought it. No, well, I didn't bring. This is why I wanted him to come up. I wanted him to come up. He's been a contractor in the city a long time. He's been doing work for the city, and he getting old just like I've been getting old. And so, and I want the people to see it and know it. Because see, one thing I like about the council meeting, and I say it all the time, that 10 years from now, you'll know exactly what I said. You don't have to go by what nobody say. You hear, you can always go back. Thank you, Adrian.
Jeffrey, I wanted to ask you something real quick. Just wanted to clarify, that gentleman that came in earlier, what he was talking about, it's not the same thing as what this is. He's talking about getting a variance. That's what he had proposed. So he kept saying it's the same thing on here right now, but this is not a variance that's being proposed right here. So I wanted to make sure that other guy that came to the planning and zoning, that was what he's trying to put on the agenda was a variance approved for a double. Is that correct?
Partially. There were two.
Okay.
He came in with two requests. One was for the variance
Okay.
for the lot size, and then the other one was for the right-of-way.
Same thing right
revocation.
here.
Yeah, the
Okay.
exact same thing.
Okay.
It's about a block away. The variance was not recommended by the planning commission, but the right-of-way revocation was. So-
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
Mr. Jeff, why are you up here? That's why I like it. I did not come to your office. Wasn't looking for you, but we ended up talking. And I said, Mr. Jeffrey, if you're going to approve something in District 3, I would like for you to ride out and look at it. Didn't I speak that to you? Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm saying that because anybody, you can sit down at a desk, you truly don't know what's going on in the neighborhood until you ride out there and see. And so I said that, and I wanted to be with just in case this here come back up, that I came to your office. So that's why I'm saying it now. And I told you, Mr. Jeff, please ride out. I said, we can ride out together, or you can ride by yourself, ride in the neighborhood before you approve anything or disapprove anything. Ride in District 3 and see for yourself. And I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
And we always do, so.
Okay.
Any other question from anyone from the council? The pleasure of the council.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilman Wells?
Abstain.
Item number 3.
Introduction of an ordinance by Richard and Deborah Sims and Doris Wingfield, owner, and Umberto Mata, applicant, to rezone a portion of Lot 3A2 to conform with existing zoning of 3A1 and 3A2 as shown on a survey by William J. Bodine, PLS, dated 7/12/2017, from RS11.A to MX-C, located at 2405 Old Baton Rouge Highway, RS-11A. Jeffrey?
Yes, and this is another case that the zoning commission heard back in January 6th, and they recommended approval. This portion of the property, we considered it kind of more of a cleanup because there was a smart parcel of land that wasn't rezoned. All the land around it was rezoned, and it was still actually part of the same parcel. And so we figured, this happened a long time ago when Old Baton Rouge Highway and Chauvin Drive dissected that it was just never a cleanup. And so we kind of considered that a cleanup, and that rezoning is going to, we recommend, or the zoning commission recommended approval back in the January 6th meeting.
I wanted to make a comment real quick. It was before your time, but on that road, more than just that little parcel was zone RS11. It was down in front of Villa West, and I talked with the planning and the planner beforehand, and we got on there to change it the zoning to where it wouldn't allow mobile homes right there. Well, this one should have been changed to R11, I think. That doesn't allow mobile homes in that other classification. This one does. So I just wanted to make sure to make a note in your system on that road right there, the other changes for the mobile homes lots being allowed. And I just want to make sure we look over that map, and I want to make sure if anything else was left off of the changes. Because beforehand, before you got here, that they had more sections of Old Baton Rouge Highway in front of there zoned where you could allow mobile homes. There's one difference in those RS 11 and I think R11 or RS, I can't remember the other one, and it's mobile homes allowed or mobile homes not allowed. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure if you can take a look at that and see if any other little parcels was left out, and we can take a look and see if they may be looked at or not.
Nope, that's
Thank you.
Very good idea.
It's one of the ones you had brought up in the beginning about the trailers, huh?
Yeah, in front of the subdivision and into the subdivision, had some concerns about having mobile homes right in front of Villa West subdivision. And so it was zoned like that beforehand, but we got it changed, and that should have been changed to the zoning without mobile homes, but it wasn't, which now it's getting changed again, so, yeah. But anyways.
Anyone else on the council have any questions? Okay. Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilman Wells?
Aye.
Public hearing will be scheduled February 8th, 5:30.
All right. Number 4.
Introduction of an ordinance TA-2021-04-00022, text amendment to UDC, order number 14-5364, Article 6.1.1, residential single family, to revise description in regards to boats on a trailer. Jeffrey.
This was another request that we got from the council to forward on to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They had a discussion about it back in our January 6th meeting, and they recommended that the city council, remove that section. There's a section in the UDC that in section 6.1.1 that specifically allows boats on trailers, without going into, because I don't have the verbiage down here, that specifically allow that. So they recommended that get struck, because again, the council had asked the planning commission to give their recommendation for that. And in addition to that, they made the recommendation that trailers must be on a hard surface, and it must allow for a 7-day exemption for temporary storage. And that was their recommendation for the city council. And I believe the city attorney gave you guys a copy of that ordinance that would fall under those recommendations. So.
Anyone from the council have any questions?
So we had some changes on that. The 7-day issue was brought up because if somebody parked there 7 days and then they move it for a day and then move it right back, and then the 7 days starts all over. So in the yard, middle of the yard in front of the house. So what did you ever, I didn't get a chance to get with you beforehand, but what did you come up with as far as cleaning that up?
So I prepared the ordinance in the same way that the Planning Commission recommended it, because I didn't feel like we could change what they had recommended. So the ordinance that I sent to you was what they recommended, which was basically you can park boats on trailers on your driveway or on a hard surface, but for temporarily, you can park it any place else for 7 days. And that's for a guy who gets his boat out of storage because he's going to go on a fishing trip and gets it a couple of days early, so we allow for that. And so that's what was recommended. Now, what Councilman DiVittorio and I talked about is a guy who might manipulate the system, right, who might move his boat back and forth from the driveway to the front yard. So I sent out what could be a recommendation that says, well, you can't move it on and off a driveway, more than 2 times in a 10-day period. And that prevents the guy from manipulating it, from just moving it back and forth. So what you could do, if you like that, look at that email I sent. If you like that, then you can amend this by adding that, or amend it however else you might want to. Of course, after we'll get some public comment on that. But that was, Sam, how I had considered the way to address what you and I talked about.
Yeah, well, I think most of the time, I think people, if they were going to take their boat out, they probably wouldn't leave it there for 7 days straight. They may, and they probably wouldn't park it in the exact front yard. They may park it on the side of the street possibly, but not actually in the front yard, non-moving. So bottom line is, it's been going back and forth for a while, but I think it's, pretty clear. I have a lot of fishermen that are friends of mine and in the community, $500,000 boats to $2,000 boats. And most of them, I don't know any of them really that doesn't either park it on their driveway covered, put in a carport somewhere in a covered area, or have it stored on a body of water somewhere on the edge with a boat lift or whatnot, or in storage somewhere. And they may bring it to their house for a day or two, and then they roll out with it if they're going on a fishing trip. So if somebody gets sick, or some family member gets ill and they can't move it or something, I'm sure they would communicate that with the city, and I don't think anyone would have an issue with that. So however we need to state it, I think we need to make it clear that they can't just leave it there for 7 days, that's my opinion, and then move it and come back. I would actually like to reduce to 7 days, maybe to 3 days. So
All that can be
Yeah,
done,
and
after a public hearing,
Yeah.
and it comes time for final adoption, whatever the council considers to be done. You can make that amendment. I just didn't feel like it was my place to
Yeah.
change what planning and zoning and recommend it to the council.
Yeah.
And I will say that when planning and zoning was looking at that, they didn't have any, it's how many days you give them.
Yeah.
There was already a 7-day provision in that section of the ordinance for nuisances, so that's where they just kind of resorted back to that 7 days. So it was no scientific.
Yeah, I was there. It was very, it made it very complicated on something, so simple. But either way, and nobody want to make any decisions, which you're on a board, so you may have to make decisions. But anyways, I'll make a motion to introduce.
Well, how many days?
Oh, well, we're making this, but we can amend it. We can amend it at a later date.
Yeah, I think you ought to hear from the public.
Yeah,
You may have
exactly.
other changes after
Yeah.
you get public comment.
Exactly. So we're just introducing it like it is.
Because this is what was recommended by planning and zoning.
Yeah. Okay. I make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon? Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilman Wells?
Aye.
Public hearing will be scheduled for February 8th at 5:30.
Before we adjourn, I have one question. Andre, are there any open investigation, suits or anything against the city?
I'm sorry,
Are there any other open investigations or lawsuits or anything against the city dealing with this use of force or anything of that nature?
well, there are lawsuits filed against the city alleging use of force, but if you're asking about the booking room incident,
No, not the, I'm just additional
Yes.
from that.
yes.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in,
Something to say, Steve? If you don't mind, President?
Can you hear me? Stephen Quinn, City of Hammond. Military veteran, returned citizen since 2009. Grew up here in Hammond, graduated from Hammond High. Grandfather, Phoenix Square, one of the streets in Hammond named after him. LaVoyce Harvey, my grandfather was civil rights activist in this town when I was a little boy. Used to go to participate in meetings with them. My grandfather would hold me by his hand. they had to do it in the dark. That's the issue of my grandfather, Mr. LaVois Harvey, but that was for a nationwide cause for civil rights. My grandmother, Margie Square, born and raised right here in Hammond, little girl. She sit and told me stories about events that happened in this town. One of the events that stood out in my mind, and always does to this day, is that right on the main street of Hammond, a black man was tarred and feathered. They rode his back and made a parade and made a scene like it was an enjoyable day. Issues about the police force back in the days still exist. None of these crimes never have been resolved. I say this today. We're in here talking about a booking room incident and prolonging procedures to right things in this city, not only just for the police activities, but equality across the city, period. Here it is, we're prolonging this. Just as the past issues back in the 30s, early 30s, here it is, 2022, those issues wasn't resolved, and we prolonging issues of today from 2017, and it's 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion on the table by Councilwoman Gonzalez, just need a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.